We all know that feeling, right? That moment when you're pouring everything you have into something, pushing with all your might, and it just, it won't budge.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of watching my youngest son trying to close the car door. He wasn't even 2 yet.
Oh, okay.
He saw his older brother do it so easily, and for him, it was this huge step,
Yeah.
towards being a big kid.
Sure, I get that.
So he'd get out, little hands reaching for this, enormous door, straining. But of course, he just wasn't strong enough. And every single time, my wife would gently step in, and he'd just be overcome with this intense frustration.
The tears.
Tears, yeah, that silent scream of, why can't I do it? Why won't it work for me? It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
How often do we run into those, seemingly immovable objects in our own lives, even when we're trying our absolute best?
That's such a vivid image and really relatable. It perfectly captures that fundamental tension,
Yeah.
between what we want and the reality we face. And that brings us right to the heart of our exploration today. Tawakkul.
Tawakkul.
Yeah. At its core, it means trust in God. But what's really fascinating is how our sources, we've got personal stories, verses from the Qur'an, some really thought-provoking parables, particularly thinking about Surah Al-Baqarah and also the writings of Bediuzzaman Said Nursi, specifically the 23rd word and the 17th word. They really unpack the deeper meaning of this trust.
Right.
And how it can actually reshape our perspective during those really frustrating times.
Yeah, exactly. Because what we're really diving into today is trying to understand why our plans sometimes just hit a wall, and how embracing this whole idea of trust can offer a completely different lens, a different way to view those challenges.
Absolutely.
I'm guessing for anyone listening, you've probably felt that same kind of frustration my little guy felt with that car door.
Oh, for sure. We all have.
So let's really dig in, shall we? Let's start right there.
Yeah.
With that image of my son. He had this pure intention, this real desire to be capable to do it himself.
Yeah, that childlike drive.
But his understanding of what was involved, well, it was so limited, he couldn't grasp the mechanics of the door or the potential risk to his little fingers.
That childlike perspective is so key, isn't it? It mirrors our own human tendency, I think.
Yeah.
We focus so much on the immediate desire
Right.
without seeing the broader context, the bigger picture.
Totally.
And this connects so powerfully with that verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, you mentioned it earlier, 2.216. Perhaps you dislike something which is good for you and like something which is bad for you. God knows and you do not know.
Such a profound verse.
It really is. What's so striking is how it immediately flips our usual way of thinking. We naturally operate with our limited viewpoint,
Right.
based on what we can see, what we want right now.
Yeah, our immediate gratification.
Exactly. But this verse just reminds us that there's a much wider scope, a wisdom that extends far beyond our current grasp.
Just like my son couldn't see the potential danger.
Precisely. We also can't see the hidden benefits in the things we find difficult, or maybe the potential downsides lurking in what we're eagerly chasing after.
It's that gap, isn't it, between our narrow vision and a much bigger picture, and the story of Qarun in the Qur'an. Wow, that really brings this contrast into sharp focus.
Oh, Qarun.
Yes, a man who, by all outward appearances, had absolutely everything. Incredible wealth, influence. People were genuinely envious.
You can picture it.
They were actually wishing they possessed what he did. Saying things like, if only we had been given what Qarun has been given. Indeed, he is truly fortunate.
Sounds like the ultimate success story, right?
It certainly does. On the surface, from a purely superficial viewpoint, Qarun seemed to have hit the pinnacle of worldly success.
Yeah.
But if we look deeper, the narrative reveals this critical flaw in his perspective, his trust. It was solely in his stuff, his material possessions.
Great intel. In his own abilities, exactly. Not in any higher power. He chalked up all his achievements entirely to himself, totally overlooking any role of, destiny or divine will.
That's such a crucial point.
It really is, because it illustrates how something that looks like a blessing in this case, just immense wealth, can actually become a test, a trial, especially if it leads us away from acknowledging a greater reality, a deeper purpose.
And we know how that story ends up unfolding.
Yeah, it's quite dramatic.
The very wealth he relied on so heavily, the thing he trusted in, it became the instrument of his downfall. The earth literally swallowed him and his grand estate.
Just gone.
And those same people who had once envied him Suddenly they grasped how precarious this seemingly unshakable position really was.
The shift in perspective is immediate.
They exclaimed, "Indeed, God gives abundant provision to whom he wills and withholds it from whom he wills." And then, crucially, had God not been gracious to us, he would have caused us to be swallowed too. Woe to the deniers.
Wow. It's such a stark reminder, isn't it? That what we see on the surface can be incredibly misleading.
Totally.
And that true security isn't really rooted in material things or earthly power.
No.
Precisely. The story of Qarun, I think, poses a really important question for all of us. Where are we truly placing our reliance?
Good question.
What are we valuing above all else? It kind of compels us to look beyond the immediate allure of worldly success.
Yeah.
And consider the deeper implications of our ambitions or pursuits. It teaches us that genuine value lies not in what we pile up, but in where our heart is truly anchored.
This really brings to mind a personal experience. I had this friend back in high school who was just different.
Oh, yeah.
He had this incredible devotion to his faith, so disciplined in his prayers, his reflections, his acts of kindness. He just radiated this kind of inner peace.
Sounds like a special person.
He really was. And then he fell in love, deeply, sincerely, but unfortunately his feelings weren't returned.
Oh, that's tough, especially then.
Yeah. Initially he was pretty resilient, but the repeated heartbreak just started to chip away at his spiritual practices.
I can see how that can happen.
He began missing his voluntary night prayers, then the early morning ones, and eventually, well, all of them. He became consumed by this unrequited love.
It took over.
It really did. And it led him down a really difficult path. Started smoking, drinking, eventually even using drugs. He was just lost. It was incredibly painful to watch.
Oh, man. That's heartbreaking.
It was. And one day he turned to me, and I remember this so vividly. He asked, with so much pain in his voice, "You always say that everything that happens to us is for our good.
Oh, boy.
So tell me, all of this, everything that's happened to me, is this also for my good?" Just such a raw, just gut-wrenching question.
Wow. That's one of those moments where, easy answers just crumble, isn't it?
Completely.
It's when the abstract idea of trust meets the sharp edge of real human suffering. It's one thing to intellectually grasp, that there might be a hidden wisdom. But when you're seeing genuine pain in someone you care about, that understanding can feel a million miles away.
Absolutely. I remember feeling completely inadequate. I knew the standard response, the sort of textbook answer,
Sure.
but it felt so hollow in that moment. So I told him honestly, I don't even know what to say right now. Because in many ways, you're right.
Acknowledging it.
You desired something deeply, and it didn't happen. And in pursuing that, you've lost parts of yourself that were so precious. I had to acknowledge his pain, the weight of his disappointment.
That's important.
But then I tried to offer just a slightly different angle, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is a presence. Something that sees us, understands us, and never abandons us. That every experience, even the most painful ones, might contain a hidden kindness, a purpose we just can't perceive yet.
A hidden mercy.
Yeah. I emphasize that true peace isn't about always getting what we desire, but about learning to trust in what a greater wisdom holds for us.
And that response, I think, really captures the practical application of tawakkul.
You think so?
Yeah. It's not about denying the pain or offering, simplistic cliches.
Right.
It's about acknowledging the
Yeah.
difficult reality while still holding on to that fundamental trust that there's a deeper wisdom at play, even if we can't fully comprehend it in the moment.
Okay.
The idea that every setback, every loss, every delay might be a veiled mercy. It's a profound concept to really sit with.
It is, and brings to mind this powerful image from Bediuzzaman Said Nursi's The 23rd Word, the parable of the two porters on a ship.
Ah, yes. The porters, good one.
Yeah. Imagine two people traveling, both with heavy baggage. One porter trusts that the ship will carry both him and his belongings, so he puts down his load, relaxes, enjoys the journey.
Makes sense.
The other porter, though, insists on carrying his heavy burden on his back, stubbornly refusing to let it go.
Oh, dear.
So he's uncomfortable, exhausted, suffering unnecessarily, while the first porter is just at peace. Nursi uses this to illustrate the very essence of tawakkul. After we've done everything within our capacity, our part,
Right, the effort is key.
we need to release the anxiety, the burden of the outcome, and just trust in God. Clinging to that weight when we don't need to, that only leads to unnecessary suffering. Nursi actually says it's like oppressing oneself.
Oppressing oneself, that's powerful phrasing. And what's so insightful here is how Nursi directly links tawakkul to inner peace. He presents this really elegant spiritual chain.
To chain, right?
Exactly. Faith leads to unity, tawhid, unity to submission, submission to trust in God, tawakkul, and trust leads to happiness in both worlds.
It's a beautiful progression.
It really is. When we truly believe in the oneness of God, his ultimate power and wisdom, that naturally leads to a sense of submission.
Tesla.
Yes, Tesla. Which isn't like passive resignation. It's more an active acceptance of a reality larger than ourselves.
Okay.
This acceptance then fosters trust that's tawakkul, knowing that we are ultimately in capable hands. And this trust, in turn, cultivates a deep and lasting happiness, both in this life and the next. He also makes that vital point. Faith is both light and strength.
Light and strength. I like that.
Yeah. It suggests this trust isn't just passively giving up. It's an active empowerment that stems from inner conviction.
Right. So it's not about just sitting back and doing nothing. That's not tawakkul.
No, not at all.
It's about putting in the effort, doing what we can, our due diligence, and then letting go of the need to control the outcome. Trusting that whatever happens is ultimately for the best, even if we can't see the wisdom in it right now.
Crazy.
And Bediuzzaman touches on this again in the 17th word, doesn't he? With this really powerful message.
He does, about calamity.
Yeah. Cease your helpless cries, meet the calamity with trust in God. For lamenting amidst a trial only compounds the trial with error.
Compounding the trial with error.
Yeah. And this immediately connects with that story of Qidr damaging the boat in Surah Al-Ha. Oh, the boat story, yes. On the surface, it looked like a purely harmful act, right? Something to grieve over. Why would you damage our boat?
Absolutely. It seemed destructive. Pointless, even.
But in reality, it was an act of protection. It saved the boat from being seized by a tyrannical king who was taking all the good boats.
Because it looked damaged, it was overlooked. Saved.
Exactly. A hidden mercy in apparent harm.
In this parable, it resonates so deeply with our own experiences, I think.
How so?
Well, we all encounter our own versions of damaged boats, don't we? Missed opportunities, derailed plans, unexpected setbacks.
Yeah, things that feel like major losses at the time.
Exactly. They can feel like significant losses, like real reasons for despair. But if we connect this back to that idea of unseen mercy, these very damages might actually be shielding us from something far more detrimental down the road.
So what we perceive as a misfortune
Could very well be a form of divine protection, steering us away from a path that would ultimately lead to greater harm or loss.
Wow. Okay, so the real essence of all this, as I'm understanding it, is that genuine peace doesn't come from always getting our own way.
Not from controlling everything.
Right, not from every single door swinging open exactly as we anticipate. Instead, it's about nurturing this profound trust. A trust in a wisdom that far surpasses our own limited understanding.
That's the core of it.
It's about learning to, kind of metaphorically speaking, place our burdens onto that ship of trust after we've played our part.
Do your work, then place the load.
Knowing that we're being carried by something far greater and more capable than ourselves.
Precisely. It's a fundamental shift in perspective, really. A move away from clinging so tightly to our own narrow understanding.
Letting go.
And embracing the possibility that there is a benevolent force at work, even amidst the challenges, even when things seem to be going wrong. It's about recognizing that our desires, well, totally valid and understandable, might not always align with what is truly ultimately best for us in the long run.
Okay. So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. As you go about your day, maybe consider a moment, a time when something you deeply, deeply yearn for just didn't come to pass.
A past disappointment.
Yeah. Maybe it was a job opportunity, a relationship, some chance that just slipped through your fingers. Looking back now, maybe with a bit more distance, a bit more clarity, can you see even a glimmer of a potential unseen benefit? Any form of protection, perhaps, that might have arisen from that specific disappointment.
That's a challenging reflection.
It is. It's definitely challenging. But just considering this idea of hidden mercy and the potential for deeper meaning behind life's unexpected turns and detours, well, it might truly unlock a new way of understanding our own journeys.
A powerful thought to end on. Trusting the journey, even when the path isn't clear.